The question was where the family could relocate to. It was extremely difficult to immigrate to the United States. And at that time, every immigrant needed a sponsor. The sponsor was required to deposit funds into a bank account so that the immigrant would not be a burden to the state. My grandmother remembered that she had a second cousin who was living in Missouri, and she wrote to him to ask him to sponsor the family. He replied that he was in his 90s, in poor health, and was living on a small pension, and did not have enough money to sponsor the entire family. She wrote back pleading with him to provide the necessary funds to enable at least my father's immigration, which he was able to do. While my father was on the ship traveling to the United States, this cousin died. If he would have died 4 weeks earlier, I would not be speaking to you tonight. November 9th, 1938 started out just like every other day. I went to school, and I still remember the day being overcast and gray. When I came home from school, my mother was waiting for me at the train station. This was most unusual because I always walked a short distance from the train station to our house alone. I clearly remember that she was holding a banana, a rare delicacy in Germany at that time. She told me as we walked home that terrible things had happened at our house while I was in school. She gave me the banana to distract me from the horrendous sight I was about to see. When I got closer to the house, I could not believe what had happened. Shattered glass was all over the front yard, and it was difficult to walk inside the house. Once I went inside the house, the Nazi youth destroyed all the mirrors, pictures, and slashed the furniture. As I went upstairs to the bedrooms, I saw there were hatchet marks on the door frames. All the bedrooms that we had were heated by coal-burning stoves, and they were ripped from the foundations and thrown on the beds, coal and all. I will never forget that sight as long as I live. This destruction was done by the Hitler Youth during the day. Ironically, many of the youths involved in this destruction were the children of customers who shopped in my grandmother's store. The parents were afraid of their own children, who would turn them into the Gestapo if they tried to help our family. The night became known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, and was the beginning of Hitler's extermination of the Jews. The Nazis burned the only synagogue in town. My brother was the last bar mitzvah in that synagogue. They also destroyed and robbed the Jewish businesses. I still remember seeing the flames in the sky from my bedroom from the destruction of the synagogue as well as the stores. And the Gestapo that evening came to the house to take my father away. Thank God my father was already in America. After that fateful day and night, I was afraid to go outside because the Hitler Jugend marched almost every day past our house. There was a tavern next door to our house, and every night we could hear the Nazis singing songs about killing the Jews. You can imagine how frightened we were and how many nightmares we had. Now, I'm sure a lot of you can't see this picture, but I will have it in the back of the sanctuary. This was our house here, and the tavern was right next to it. But you'll all see that later on. Since my grandmother's store was not completely destroyed, the Nazis took over the store without any compensation. My school in Whitlish was also destroyed. Soon after, there was a directive from the Gestapo that Jews had to turn in all their gold, silver, bank accounts, and other valuables. If they refused, they were put in jail. I can still see my mother and grandmother taking the jewelry to the Gestapo headquarters in town. During this period, our devoted housekeeper, a Frau Hiller, who no longer was allowed to work for us, took a huge risk and brought us food at night. At this time, all mail outside of Germany written by Jews was censored by the Gestapo. I was told that before my father left for the United States, he and my mother set up a unique system to thwart the Nazis from knowing about our family's well-being. My mother would snip a lock of my hair and put it in each letter to let my father know that the family was okay. Letters without the hair told him that things were getting worse. You can see what happened to my hair. She wrote a lot of letters. Meanwhile, my father was working very hard in order to save enough money to bring the rest of the family to the United States. My mother, brother, and myself left Germany in April 1939 on the ship President Roosevelt with only $10 in our pocket. That is all the amount that the Germany would let us take out. My grandmother was lucky enough to leave on the last boat out of Germany in 1940. My uncle and his family could not enter the United States and was forced to go to southern Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. Other family members went to Shanghai, China, which welcomed the Jews at that time. Many of our family members were not as lucky and were killed in the concentration camps. Now, I'll fast forward. 35 years after I left Germany, I visited Bernkastel Kues, our house, and my grandmother's store. I knocked on the door of the house, and an elderly woman and her daughter answered. I introduced myself, and the owner was very surprised. Later, she told me that she was worried that I was coming back to take away her house that the Nazis had taken from us. As she took me through the house, even though the door frames were covered by many coats of paint, I still was able to see the hatchet indentations that the Nazi youth did many, many years before. Even though I was anxious to see the house, it brought back bad memories. I then went to see the old synagogue in town. It was now a machine shop. However, you could still see the Star of David on top of the building. My grandmother's store was now a tavern. I then drove the 35 miles back to Whitlish, where I went to school. The school was no longer there, but the synagogue, miraculously, was still standing with a sign outside saying, Jewish Museum.